The Americans had sophisticated arms and ammunition, but the Viet Cong had almost none. It is this tunnel system that was instrumental in prolonging the war and vexing the Americans so much that they finally had to withdraw. Communist forces began digging a network of tunnels under the jungle terrain of South Vietnam in the late 1940s during their War of Independence from French colonial authority. Tunnels were often dug by hand, only a short distance at a time. As the United States increasingly escalated its military presence in Vietnam in support of a non-communist regime in South Vietnam beginning in the early 1960s, North Vietnamese and Viet Cong troops, as communist supporters in South Vietnam were known, gradually expanded the tunnels. At its peak during the Vietnam War, the network of tunnels in the Cu Chi district linked Viet Cong support bases over a distance of some 250 kilometers, from the outskirts of Saigon all the way to the Cambodian border. As the United States relied heavily on aerial bombing, North Vietnamese and Viet Cong troops went underground in order to survive and continue their guerrilla tactics against the much better supplied enemy. In heavily bombed areas, people spent much of their life underground, and the Cu Chi tunnels grew to house entire underground villages, in effect with living quarters, kitchens, ordnance factories, hospitals, and bomb shelters. Resilient people of all ages in Cu Chi dug the system of tunnels by hand and simple tools in the wartime. Each time the dark covered the sky, they started their work. They used simple holes to dig soft earth, but crowbars sufficed to take the brunt of rock and hard ground. It is believed that excavated material and soil were brought out of the tunnels by plastic bags and bamboo baskets. One wonderful thing about this work was that all traces of excavating were always removed to keep the tunnels converted. In a lot of places of Cu Chi, rivers and bomb craters became dumping grounds. Despite the fact that tunnel excavation was close to the surface, bombing gradually forced Cu Chi people to dig deeper until it was safe enough to protect them. The tunnel network embraces 4 levels at different depths. While the first one, 4 meters deep, is the place of traps, firing posts, and ventilation shafts, the second has sleeping chambers and kitchens. Additionally, the third level, which can withstand mortar attacks 6 to 7 meters from the surface, provided aid stations, tunnel connections, and storage. The last level, at the depth of 10 meters, is for water sources. Wells were dug not only to provide drinking water, but also to lead to the Saigon River. This waterway was also used as an escape route in several emergencies. Because of the serious lack of oxygen underground, Vietnamese guerrillas forced channeled air through dispersed holes on the earth. Due to that, the network could accommodate up to thousands of guerrillas. Some evidence illustrates that the Viet Cong soldiers were once forced to stay underground for weeks. The severe life in the tunnels, as well as the wartime, made people depend on a strong communal spirit. It was compassionate that the community sometimes fell in the terrible situation that they must eat grass, stale rice, and even drink their own urine because of the food storage. All people of all ages, no matter if they are male or female, were showed how to fight in the tunnels. Nevertheless, their lives were not merely identified as combat and defense, but also included dance, song, and drama performances. It was possible to say that the life during this hard time was a picture of a gun in one hand, yet guitar in the other. While the Vietnamese guerrillas were at the disadvantage in weaponry and technology, they were very smart to collect waste materials left by the Americans for recycling or repurposing. For instance, earnings from the shrapnel which was sold would be used to buy food and send it to the tunnel dwellers, or they repaired detonators and reused them in combat. Recycling American weaponry demonstrated that the Vietnamese people could adapt well to the difficult situations in their life. In addition to providing underground shelter, the Siu Chi tunnels served a key role during combat operations, including as a base for communist attacks against nearby Saigon. Viet Cong soldiers lurking in the tunnels set numerous booby traps for U.S. and South Vietnamese infantrymen, planting tripwires that would set off grenades, spike trap, a platform that swings open when stepped on to reveal a grave-sized trench embedded with spikes, booby traps of various kinds, snakes, scorpions, fire ants, and even hot oil. To combat these guerrilla tactics, U.S. forces would eventually train some soldiers to function as so-called tunnel rats. These soldiers, usually of small stature, would spend hours navigating the cramped, dark tunnels to detect booby traps and scout for enemy troops. Often, gaining entry to the tunnels was difficult as the doors were challenging to discover without careful search. The Viet Cong devised ingenious ways to conceal the tunnels from the Americans and from their German shepherds, which were used to sniff out Vietnamese through the tunnel's air holes and smoke vents. They put hot chili peppers and garlic and all kinds of species in those areas. So once the dogs smelled it, it would destroy their nose and they'd go yelping away. Or they would use American smells to get the dogs to go away. By planting an old piece of an American uniform, soap or aftershave near the air holes, the Viet Cong made the dogs think it was friendly territory. The strategy worked so well that U.S. forces dissolved the dog units within 6 months of starting them. Bombing was ineffective. Even 750-pound bombs landing 50 yards away from a tunnel entrance had no effect on either the tunnel or the entrance. Attempts to smoke out Viet Cong with tear gas or smoke grenades failed in the larger networks. The average soldier sent down to explore an entrance usually failed to recognize the connection of surface tunnels to deeper networks. While hasty clearance often fell to the smallest soldier in an infantry squad or platoon, asking them to go into deeper tunnels was generally counterproductive. Many casualties among these untrained soldiers came from accidents in the tunnels instead of enemy action. In January 1966, some 8,000 U.S. and Australian troops attempted to sweep the Cu Chi district in a large-scale program of attacks dubbed Operation Crimp. After B-52 bombers dropped a large amount of explosives onto the jungle region, the troops searched the area for enemy activity, but were largely unsuccessful, as most communist forces had disappeared into the network of underground tunnels. Heavy fighting resulted in significant casualties on both sides, but the combined American and Australian force was able to uncover an extensive tunnel network covering more than 200 kilometers, at the cost of 8 Australians and 14 Americans killed and 29 Australians and 76 Americans wounded. A year later, around 30,000 American troops launched Operation Cedar Falls, attacking the communist stronghold of Binh Duong province north of Saigon, near the Cambodian border, an area known as the Iron Triangle, after hearing reports of a network of enemy tunnels there. After bombing attacks and the defoliation of rice fields and surrounding jungle areas with powerful herbicides, U.S. tanks and bulldozers moved in to sweep the tunnels, driving out several thousand residents, many of them civilian refugees. North Vietnamese and Viet Cong troops slipped back within months of the sweep. And in early 1968, they would use the tunnels as a stronghold in their assault against Saigon during the Tet Offensive. In 1968, the Viet Cong used the cover of the Buddhist New Year, Tet celebrations to change tactics and launch a massive attack on U.S.-held areas across South Vietnam, including the U.S. Embassy in Saigon. The attack was a success for the Viet Cong, and although ultimately they were driven back by the U.S. Army, it showed the Americans that despite all the soldiers, bombs, and money spent in Vietnam, they were not making progress against the Viet Cong or communism. Many historians see the Tet Offensive as a turning point in America's mission in Vietnam. After it, President Johnson said that if the North Vietnamese launched another attack, many men on both sides of the struggle will be lost. There is no need for this to be so. It's likely to have been a factor in President Johnson's decision not to run for re-election in 1968. He had often voiced concern about the rising number of American casualties of the war.